Hello and welcome to another beehiiv growth webinar. We are here live from New York and Austin, Texas. Your hosts, EJ White and Bella Rose Mortel. I'm the head of growth here at beehiiv, and I'm joined by our wonderful social media strategist and expert, Bella Rose Mortel, to talk to you about all things social media as it relates to your newsletter. So as we get into things, I'm going to start sharing my screen. And share the second screen. There we go. And we got an absolutely electric presentation for you today. We're so excited to be here. Amplifying newsletter growth with social media, from likes to list building. Whoever put together this title is great. I love the copywriting. This was Tony, I'm pretty sure, his handiwork. But we're talking about social media today. We're talking about LinkedIn. We're talking about Twitter, X. We're talking about TikTok. We're talking about Facebook, maybe a little bit in passing. YouTube, social media, you all know it. You use it. You might not love it, but it's a reality that you got to use it to grow your newsletter. And so we got everything you could possibly want today. What we're going to cover, we have an agenda here, laying the groundwork. So every one of these growth webinars begins with this laying the groundwork section where we're going to talk about the kind of prerequisites in order to grow your newsletter. These are non-negotiable essentials to setting yourself up for success. Without them, you will not be successful. So we don't gloss over them. We don't pass over them. We go in depth and we start there every single time. From there, we're going to follow that agenda: basics, follower engagement, converting followers to subscribers, cross promotion, and hitting the gas with paid ads. We won't go super deep into the paid ad stuff. We have entire webinars. We spend an entire hour sometimes talking about specifically paid ads. So we'll mention them in passing and how they fit into the whole social strategy. And we'll end with a nice Q&A. On that note, if you do have questions, as much as we ask people to save them for the end, people don't. You ask them in the chat. That's what the chat's for. So Tony's here. He'll be monitoring the chat while I'm talking. He'll probably answer some questions. Bella Rose, anything to add before we get this show on the road?
I think we can just jump right in. You did a great job with the intro.
Amazing. Thank you. I appreciate it. You get a raise. Perfect. So starting out, laying the groundwork, what do we have to do to be successful? A lot of times we have people who are just starting their newsletter journey joining us and to that point, if you want to drop in like where you are in your journey, whether you have a newsletter, you're just starting out, you're building one, let us know in the chat, let everyone see. You can even drop a link to your newsletter if you want. Don't like spam weirdly though. Be normal. We have some people sometimes who just take it over the top. But the important part is that when you're starting, there's at least 4 steps that you have to do. There may be more. These are the ones that we focus on. But they all come down to really making sure that you have a very clear vision and roadmap for where your newsletter is going to go. And those three of the 4 components are understanding your audience, posting consistently, and choosing the right niche. And not necessarily in that order. They're just on that order in the screen. It's not even alphabetical order, but the newsletter niche and understanding your audience go hand in hand. Really picking a niche where you can be very specific and intentional about who you're trying to reach is one of the most, if not the most important part about this entire journey. A lot of people, 99% of the people we talk to, go too wide when they're thinking about creating their niche and who they're trying to target. And so I like to use the example of a foodie nutrition type of newsletter. If I just said I was going to start a newsletter about nutrition and maybe I had some recipes or something like that, that would be obviously way too broad, because what does that mean? There's people who swear by keto, there's people who swear by veganism, and they're totally different and incompatible. And so what we're really talking about is finding and niching down in a way that allows you to be very focused and specific with how you're going to talk to your audience. And so the example I like to use is my girlfriend is pescatarian, dairy-free, and gluten-free. And so she's very restrictive with what she can have. And when we're out and if we're running into people and we meet somebody else who has the same way of eating, it's like a kind of magic moment where these people, that she meets, they just have this shared experience. They have so much that they understand about each other because it's a relatively restrictive way. They deal with the same issues when they go to restaurants. They go to the same issues when they're trying to cook meals. They go through the same issues when they're shopping at grocery stores, et cetera. And so it's a great example to say, if I was to start a newsletter, if I was talking about just nutrition, there's a huge wide world and I would be going too broad. People would not know whether my content is for them or whether it's just like general, and nobody gets engaged by kind of general stuff that doesn't speak to them. Whereas if I was going to speak and create a newsletter about nutrition for this very narrow pescatarian, gluten-free, and dairy-free audience, I'd know so much about the lived experience and what engages these people that it would make it very easy for me to create content and speak to this relatively narrow audience. And at the same time, when that audience sees my content, they're going to immediately realize, oh my gosh, this is something that is for me and nobody's speaking to me. I need to follow this because clearly this person understands what I'm going through. And so these kind of go together because picking your niche allows you to really understand your audience, and understanding your audience is really at the core of what it means to like really start and build a successful newsletter. If you're not building content and creating content that resonates deeply and inspires people, you're not going to be successful. And what I mean by that is to say you don't necessarily have to always, for the rest of your life, appeal very narrowly to that tiny audience, but you have to start somewhere, and you have to give users a reason to trust and to build your authority. And that's not to say if you start in a very narrow niche, you could start a second newsletter that targets another niche, or you could slowly expand from maybe, in my example, gluten-free, dairy-free pescatarians. I could start there and then maybe just say, hey, we're going to get a little bit more, we're going to widen the pie and we're just going to focus on pescatarianism. And then we're going to maybe have some recipes that have dairy or gluten or something like that. But that would only happen once I've formed that core audience and I would have seen that there is demand to go a little bit wider. And in that case, maybe that's not a great example because typically that's not something that's negotiable, but you could find tons of examples where it's like you can start very, very niche, and then as you grow your following, you can get more wider from there. The second part of that is once you've found that kind of core audience and you are understanding your niche, the next thing you do is really start publishing consistently and reliably. When you're asking for someone's email, they're putting a lot of trust. In today's world, your email is tied to so much. The inbox is typically a very guarded place where people are spending their attention, and it's something where if you are not providing value and if you're not delivering that value consistently, you're going to lose that trust and you're going to get unsubscribed and people are going to stop reading your newsletter. And so what I recommend personally to people is if you're starting a newsletter, publish like your first 10 posts to no one, just to start building that habit of publishing before you even start putting it out into the world, so that you have that habit there, so that when you do start promoting your newsletter, one, you already have that habit that you're going to keep delivering on week in and week out. But two, it serves a very tangible purpose of giving users a archive and a backlog of content to read about as they explore and experience and discover your newsletter. Lastly, specific to our conversation today, and this is where I'm going to bring Bella Rose in a minute, the last thing on here is going deep, not wide. This is something that we see a lot of people make the mistake of they start a newsletter and then they say, okay, I started the newsletter. I need to be distributing my content across YouTube and X and LinkedIn and TikTok and Instagram all at the same time. And that is the complete opposite approach that 99.9% of people should make. And if I, during this presentation, make general blanket statements, it's because the exceptions prove the rule. So basically, everybody should start and go deep in a single platform rather than going wide. We'll get into how you can repurpose content down the road, but the key really should be to crack the code on a specific channel and use that channel as your lab. And that's where one of the places where understanding your audience comes into play, because understanding your audience will give you the cues on where you should be focusing your attention in building on social media. I had somebody in a webinar back, I think it was the Jumpstart one, said, hey, I hate publishing on X, or I'm like publishing on X and no one's interacting. And we asked, where are your audience? Where does your audience live? And his audience is on Reddit. So you need to be on Reddit, because if nobody in your audience is on X, it doesn't matter if that's like where you feel most comfortable publishing, you're not going to be reaching your audience. So I know I've spent a lot of time relatively for this presentation speaking specifically to the laying the groundwork part, but it really is so critical. And typically, if you can really nail the groundwork, the rest of what we're going to talk about is very much secondary. It really becomes so much easier to succeed once you've nailed this. And the last thing I promise this last thing I'll say before I bring in Bella Rose's perspective. If you read about startups, there's a concept of this thing called product market fit, which means when a company has reached product market fit, it means that the product that they're offering is desired and fits the needs of the audience to which they are offering their product to. And that's generally the point where organic growth starts to occur. And pretty much almost in spite of trying to grow, people are sharing your product, people are using your product and buying your product. In the newsletter world, when you're starting a newsletter, it's not really that different. We call it content market fit, but if you really nail kind of these 4 points and you have a niche, you understand deeply who that audience is, you're publishing consistently, and you're going deep and basically engaging that audience where they spend their attention, you will start to see, when you reach that content market fit, people starting to share your content organically, sharing it with friends, sharing it with other people in that audience, reposting it, whatever. And that's really when you know you've reached content market fit. And at that point is the point in which you really should turn the growth jets on. But before that, we actually typically see a lot of people try too early. They start publishing, they don't really have that content market fit, and they're already concerned about, how do I grow? Until you've reached content market fit, it's going to be like swimming upstream if you're trying to grow without content market fit. So with that said, Bella Rose, I know I talked a lot. This is my one big monologue of the presentation today, I promise. Can you give us a little insight on how you've seen creators implement these strategies and some of your experience with beehiiv in doing this for ourselves? Because these approaches, we do the same thing.
Yeah, the thing that I would want to double click on the most is this consistent content aspect, because not to deter anyone, because I know there's a lot of people in the chat who said they're just starting out, but like posting your newsletter consistently really is like the hardest thing and the hardest hump to get over. I see a lot of people tweet like at beehiiv or like post or like, oh, I had to drop my newsletter for however many months because XYZ. And so that's why I think Tony put this in the chat that we recommend starting twice a month. But really, if that's not something you think you can commit to, like maybe just start with monthly, because what matters most is getting in the habit, as EJ said, of continually posting at a cadence you can keep up with. And then once you get more used to it, you get better, you understand more about what your audience wants to see, you can continue to ramp that up.
Absolutely. And I would say no one was born a great writer, and no one was born finding it super easy. If you find somebody who was born knowing how to write, let me know, because we can put them on TV and make a ton of money. It's something you have to learn. Just because everybody can, not everybody, but most people can write a sentence doesn't make you a good writer. It's something you have to practice. And it really is all about that consistency. And so there's some books out there. The Artist's Way is one where I recommend doing the daily writing. Even if you're not publishing that writing daily, doing some writing daily to get that into that habit it can be a really good practice. All right, so moving on. Newsletter brand building basics. So we're going to take things back. We're going to build brick by brick, starting from the very basics. We have consistency in tone, voice, and content, visual identity, engaging followers, highlighting unique selling position, and being relatable and authentic. So these are the different dimensions of building a brand on social media that is going to be salient and is going to attract folks to want to get more content from you. So consistency is important. As you understand who your audience is, you will know how they see the world, how they think about the world, and how they want to be spoken to. If you are part of that target audience, you know how you want to be spoken to. And if you are not, there's a lot of research you can do. You can follow subreddits. You can figure out where your audience is spending their time online and seeing what type of voice and tone and imagery motifs basically do you see within this space. And then you can emulate those in order to be engaging. Or if you have something that's like breaking the mold, do that too and see what works. The value of social media within your newsletter world is that you can post as much as you want. One of the best quotes I think we've gotten from Matt McGarry, who's a newsletter agency operator, is that if you're publishing even once a week, that means in a month you have 4 opportunities to learn what your audience wants to hear about and what works. If you're posting on social media, you have potentially 4 or 5 times a day to understand that. So use social media as this kind of testing ground to understand what do people engage with, what gets them, excited and what gets them engaged, and then take those learnings and apply them to your newsletter. But specifically building that brand on social media can be a great way to get that process started. And you can, as you're very early on your journey, you can start experimenting with those different elements of brand voice, is what we would call it, or brand identity, we would call it more broadly, to figure out what users are going to like. And you'll see that when you start to see people engaging, people liking, people resharing and stuff like that. Obviously, when we think about brand, one of the things that most people think about brand is like the visual identity of a logo. So if I say the word Coke, you can think of the Coca-Cola logo. If I say IKEA, you see the big yellow block letters. It's like that is one element of a visual identity, but you can from that example see it's like very important and can be very valuable. Making sure that as you post content, you have a consistent visual identity will help as you grow and get bigger. It'll help people recall and recognize you on social media. Ideally, as they're scrolling the feed, if you noticed this image to the right, if you're scrolling the feed and you follow the neuron, you will as time goes by, recognize that when you see this kind of stylization in your newsfeed, that's a post from the neuron. And if that's something that you're engaged by, you're going to stop and you're going to read what they have to say. And that's obviously the goal. Something that can't be replicated by anybody except yourself is engaging and following with you, engaging your followers personally and being relatable and authentic. Now, you might say, hey, you just said if you're not part of your target audience, go figure out what they like and then do that. That's not at odds with being authentic. You can figure out how your audience wants to be spoken to and also be authentic at the same time. It's about engaging earnestly and providing value, being there to actually help and be champions of your audience, even if you are like a newcomer to the space. And then the last thing here is one of the most critically important parts is really highlighting the unique selling position that you are offering to your users. This is going to be the reason for existence and the reason why they should trust you with their time and trust you with their email. So I would say the takeaway from this slide would be think about like what value do you add to people's life? Why does your newsletter exist? What should people gain by spending their time with you? And highlight that to your audience. Bella Rose, I would love to hear how you think about this for your audience or for our audience or when you're building your personal audience.
Yeah, something that I really wanted to emphasize from like a content strategy, social media perspective is that consistency aspect, because a lot of times when you hear that and you're thinking about social media, your immediate thought is like how many times I'm posting, or I'm posting every single day at 9 a.m. And yes, it does mean that, but also another thing to think about is you need to be consistent in what your audience can expect to see from you, because that is going to make your account more followable. And then everything you post will be more followable because people will see that, know, oh, I'm going to get these tips to grow my newsletter every single time I see a post from this account. So I definitely want to make sure everybody knows that it's not just however many times a day you can get things out. It also makes a lot of sense to think about the actual value that you're putting on the timeline and on the feed, so people will want to follow you there. I also think that if you're just starting out here with social and with your newsletter, I personally would start building your personal brand with your newsletter and use like your personal accounts there. Because we're in the era of personal brands and people follow people. So like as much and as great content you can put out from a logo or a brand account, I would really have all that content come from your personal account, because people are going to connect with you a lot easier than they can connect with a logo on social media.
Absolutely. I love it. You saw the question from the chat. That's perfect. Yeah, I would say definitely good advice. And if you do have a reason to do a logo account, like beehiiv, the beehiiv account comes from a logo, Neuron here does come from a logo. You're not doing anything wrong if it just fits your audience. If you want to be more of a kind of corporate identity with your newsletter, like that's fine. But I definitely agree that like you will find it a little bit easier. People just generally trust and are willing to give face accounts a little bit more of a organic view and more of the benefit of the doubt, versus if they see a brand jumping into a conversation, there's a little bit more of a guarded feeling. I'm sure we can all relate to that. It's like if you're on social and a brand logo jumping into a conversation, you're like, okay, what is their angle? What is their perspective? Even if it's the same as if you had a face account, it's just something that happens with like how we think about and how we perceive media online. All right. So next up, once we've built that brand identity, we're posting on social. How do we then maximize follower engagement? So again, we're not even talking about the newsletter yet. We're really building the brick by brick. We have the identity online. We have the vibe, the feel, look and feel, the tone and everything of the channel. So the next step there is actually getting in front of people's eyeballs through the feed, creating content that's going to be favored by the algorithm. And the way that we're going to do that is first and foremost just by testing and testing. There's again, similarly to how no one was born knowing how to write, no one was born knowing how to hack the algorithm. It's all about testing. It's all about basically being very deliberate about how you're posting and doing all that kind of tests. Bella Rose, I want to pause here before I even go further. Like, how are some ways that we have done testing of social media to refine and hone in on how beehiiv engages?
Yeah, on this test angle, I would honestly say an interesting thing about social is that a lot of times the strategy is revealed to you. Like you can try something however many times, and then if it's not hitting, you will know internally that maybe we need to make some adjustments, because there's nothing worse than continuing to do something just because you think that's the right thing to do when no one is really resonating with it. So I would definitely say on this first bullet point, you need to not take things personally. I have definitely had pieces of content that I posted that I thought were going to be bangers. I was like, this is the series of Beehive. This is going to be like the best content in the world. And then it ended up not working. And so we had to change like a little part of it or flip it on its head or whatever. So definitely be open to a lot of changes and adapting with these platforms, because things change all the time, and the way the algorithms work change all the time, and the way that your audience wants to consume your information will change all the time. So definitely be open down the line to adapting to those things.
No, it's perfect. So beyond just testing and figure out what's going to get in front of users and what's going to get the most views, and by looking at just likes, and obviously you're looking at likes, you're looking at comments, you're looking at saves if you're on X, if you're on Instagram, you're going to be looking at the shares. Basically, optimize for those things. You can calculate an engagement rate by taking all of those, your kind of metrics, whether it's a like, a comment, a share, whatever, and dividing it by your follower count. It's a quick and easy way to come up with your engagement rate, and you can track that over time for your various posts. So you can understand not just how many of your profiles are being reached, but like how engaging that content is. And then from there, one of the ways to get in front of those users and pick up followers is to be always interacting with your users within your space. So finding content that is relevant to your subject matter and liking, responding to comments, commenting, DMing people. And when I say DMing people, don't say, I don't mean you see somebody post something relevant, you immediately DM them and say, hey, you should follow my newsletter or follow my account. But if it's relevant, to DM just some appreciation or respond in a comment to add to the conversation. We'll get into it later on, but just in short, if you have your profile, if you have your LinkedIn, the URL to your sign up in your social profile, you will pick up subscribers, because people will see your comment. They'll say, oh, this is really useful. This person has a perspective. They'll click on your account and then see that link. And then if they're the right user and you are putting out the right content, they will follow that link and you'll pick up that subscriber. In the beginning, it's incredibly important. We talk about that content market fit. There's a lot of friction in that process. They have to see your comment, they have to click through to your account, they have to click through to your newsletter, and then they have to subscribe. And they have to do all of that without you actually like saying, hey, you should subscribe to my newsletter. When you start getting people to sign up that way and going through all of that friction, it's a really solid signal that you're doing the right thing and that you're getting people, you're reaching the right people, and that you have that content market fit with what you're putting out into the world. Very tactically, you can put together interactive content. So one of the things that we love to see is people putting out things where it's like they'll ask a question to the world. They say, what do you think about this? Or create a poll either on X or share some sort of poll. Maybe like in this case from Michael Parrish, he shared a screenshot of a poll that he made within beehiiv. Basically, these are things that are going to add to the conversation and be a starting point where users can share their perspectives and around a specific topic. Next, I say hack the algorithms with native content. It's no secret, and maybe this is new to some people, but when you're on a specific platform, you need to meld and engage in the kind of native format of that platform and what's popular. For example, if you're on X, post those tweets, and if you post tweets that are like not like super, super long, like that don't exceed that character count. When they release the algorithm, they literally told us, they released the algorithm about 6 months ago, 8 months ago, maybe a year ago. You could actually read like what the algorithm weights and how it weights different things. No secret, if you get your account verified, that's a huge thing. But LinkedIn, for example, very recently launched a new video format. And you might think video and LinkedIn's not known for video. But when they launch a new feature, typically the algorithm will promote these new features that they want to promote. And so for a time, and probably still today, because it's still relatively new, if you post quality video that is formatted correctly and engaging, you will get outsized reach for those videos because LinkedIn is trying to promote that new feature. And so paying attention to what the algorithm wants to promote and wants to hear more about is going to be a great key to success. I think one of the things specifically, like on X, like they were trying to disincentivize people leaving the platform. So if you posted a link, you're going to get deprioritized. But if you just post just the normal 80, 240 characters or whatever, and it's related to your topic content, you're going to get promoted. One of the things that's important and is relevant to this conversation about personal branding versus face accounts and whatnot is that these algorithms are very smart, and they learn and they understand what you engage with and what people engage with you about. Case in point for myself, I'm always talking about beehiiv. My 3,200 followers or whatever have all come from me just responding to users talking about beehiiv and like offering them help. I'm a reply guy. And Basically, that has shown the Twitter algorithm that I'm pretty much only good for beehiiv related stuff on my account because it's EJ_beehiiv. So if I post about beehiiv, I get a relatively good response because it puts me in front of those feeds. If I post about sports, if I posted something about the Super Bowl, I'm like I don't get any play because the algorithm knows, okay, EJ is not a thought leader, or people who follow him are not doing it because of relevance around the Super Bowl. They're doing it for stuff around beehiiv. And for better or worse, I know that. And it's just one thing to remember. So as you're building that personal brand, you will be prioritized in those audiences as you go through. Lastly, the entire goal here is to really foster a community through conversation and consistent content. Just like you need to be posting consistently with your newsletter, posting to social media consistently is very important. It is one of those things that also helps you get prioritized by the algorithm. But at the end of the day, even with beehiiv, there are people that I feel like I know just because I've seen them post so often and so regularly, and they just are fixtures of the community, and they're just regular people. It's just like they post all the time, and then internally here at beehiiv, would be like, oh, did you see what so-and-so posted? And it's just like everybody knows who that is because they're always posting and always engaging with our content. That's that kind of community that you want to build. Before we move on, Belrose, you have any thoughts here?
Yeah, one thing I just want to add, as like you're posting on social media and promoting your newsletter, it's not weird to ask for engagement. I know it feels like you're climbing to the top of the cringe mountain when you're like, let me know in the comments, like what you think about this, or follow for more or whatever. But I promise you, like that actually does trigger something in people's heads to want to follow you for more, whatever, or to reply to your questions. So don't be afraid to do that because it's totally normal too. And then also one other thing about interacting I wanted to add here is if posting like to the feed or to your profile seems like a huge feat right now, just remember that like commenting is a form of posting, especially on some of these, or I guess all social media platforms. Sometimes your comments will also get this post into other people's feeds. And if you're adding a comment that has value, adding to a conversation, like that counts and that's still getting seen by people. So again, like if it feels like a lot of pressure to make one big post, you can always start smaller and just start commenting and getting yourself into other conversations.
Yeah, I love that. That's so valuable. You had said something at the beginning I wanted to add. I might have forgotten it, but if it comes back to me, I'll move on. So at this point in the journey, we have created that brand. We have started to promote the brand on social media in a way that we are collecting engagement and we're building our community. So now we get to the point where we might want to think about like, how do you then take that following and that clout that you're building, that community that you're building, and extract some value. When I say that, it sounds very transactional, and in some ways it is, but what we're really building towards here is that kind of idea that Gary Vee shared about 10 years ago. It's like the jab, right hook of provide value and then ask for something. And when you're providing value at that 2-to-1 ratio, at the very least, sometimes it can be a 5-to-1 ratio, whatever it is, just be providing value. There's not you don't have an issue. It's the cringe mountain thing. It's if you're providing value, then there's nothing wrong with once in a while asking for something back. Oh, my thought that I had was that I don't follow him, but I'm pretty sure like Mr. Beast asks people to still subscribe to his channel. Like he's like literally the most followed person on earth and he still is subscribed, right? I don't know. He does that. I feel like he does. I feel like every YouTuber just is like, subscribe to my channel. And you're like, dude, yeah, I'm not going to subscribe because I don't subscribe to anyone on YouTube. But if you use YouTube, then like you probably should. But anyway, so converting subscriber, bunch of different ways to do this. So one thing that's pretty common to most of these different methods, clear calls to action in a post. A call to action, if you're not familiar, is just the statement that is calling somebody to action. It's actually pretty self-explanatory, but it's that action word of click the link to subscribe to my newsletter, get the guide, download now. Like these are all calls to action that are like basically instructing, kind of commanding the user to do something. And that something is whatever action you want them to take. So within this, you see this post on LinkedIn where this person, talks about switching their newsletter to beehiiv, and then basically, has this very soft call to action at the bottom. You can subscribe to our newsletter here and has the link. Whether it's whether it's in a video, if you're on TikTok and you have a video with a link at the end of it, or say, hey, check out my bio for the link. There's a bunch of different ways to do this, but the common thing is that you just should be doing this at least every once in a while. You don't obviously want to shoehorn it in where it's not relevant or where it's like awkward, but as it makes sense, you can definitely add it. One way to make this a little bit more relevant is to include social proof and testimonials as you do this post. So sometimes you might have a specific post where you're at the very end of it, you're like, join 20,000 people who are getting their news each day from XYZ newsletter, and then you add the call to action. So that social proof can prime users to want to take that action. And it can be helpful, obviously, if you have testimonials. That's one way that you can post and share and show the relevance to folks. One way to like actually incentivize people to actually convert is to basically use exclusive content in your newsletters that you're not sharing on social. So if you have, maybe you make a post on Reddit around some topic that's relevant to the community, you post like most of it, or maybe you post a teaser and you say, to get the rest of this, if you're interested in reading the rest, go over to my newsletter where I have all of it, or click this link to read the rest of the story. And that takes the person from the actual platform to your content. As I've referenced before, one of the mechanisms to do this on pretty much all platforms is to use a link in bio tool, or the native link building tools within platforms, to put a link to your newsletter subscription page. And then I think we'll cover this in a little bit more depth, but one of the most common things, and if you haven't heard of this before, it's going to be a term that you want to get familiar with, but it's using lead magnets in order to incentivize subscriptions or downloads. And so a lead magnet can be any kind of resource or asset or video or anything that is of value to your audience that you will basically trade in return for an email. I'm going to do a callback back to that example around like the nutrition newsletter from the beginning. I could use a lead magnet of get the guide for a 7-day pescatarian, gluten-free, dairy-free meal prep. So somebody who's in that lifestyle might want a meal prep guide. They don't want to do the work. In today's world, it can be easy to get, but with AI, but it can still be useful. You can say, hey, if you give me your email, if you subscribe to this newsletter, I will send you this 7-day meal prep guide. And that could be useful for them. It's all about knowing your audience and what is valuable to them.
Absolutely. I think this is a great opportunity to share this framework that I see working really well for people, or it seems to be working really well. See it a lot on Twitter, but I'm sure you could make it work on Threads, LinkedIn, Instagram stories even. People will post about their newsletter like the day before they send it out. So be like, okay, banger dropping tomorrow. It's going to be awesome. Subscribe here if you haven't already. They'll post about it the day of, just published this. Go check it out, whatever. And then the day after, it will be like, in case you missed it, here's this amazing newsletter that I just wrote. It's awesome. You should read it. And then, of course, you're going to grow your subscriber base because you're going to gate all your posts. So people are going to want to know so bad what you wrote about, and they're going to have to put in their email to subscribe and see the whole thing. So maybe test that out if you want to do that whole 1, 2, 3, day before, day of, day after, because people aren't going to see all three. Like the reality situation is on social media, no one is going to see all three of those posts. And so I definitely wouldn't be afraid to repeat yourself. Don't go too crazy, but for sure, I think that's a great framework, and I would encourage y'all to try it because I think a lot of people will find success there.
Absolutely. That's great advice. I wonder, that's great. I think we've been talking about that a little bit lately in terms of when you look at your metrics on social, like the number of people who actually see one of your posts is going to be one, typically not way less than your follower count, but in terms of all of the people out in the world who are your audience, is going to be much smaller. Let's say if your audience is tens of thousands of people, you're going to have a couple hundred people see a post. And we get caught up typically in thinking like, oh, because I posted it, I remember posting it, I know what I posted, might even had a couple people comment on it, that like the whole world has seen this content, and that like now if I post it again, it's like I'm being redundant. But the truth is like most of the world has never seen like any of your social posts like at all. And so you could be very repetitive and still not really reach all of the people who are out there. So definitely don't worry about being too repetitive, because just the way that the world works, you're going to reach new people. You're going to find people who didn't see it, who weren't online. It's really, if you don't have a massive following where people are really like tightly engaged with hanging on your every word and watching your every post, the chances that you're going to get looped into the algorithm at the right time in the right moment so that all of your audience is going to see your post is pretty low. So with that said, we are going to come to our mid-presentation intermission. So this is the Bella Rose slide. Also the perfect time to take a break because we got Bella Rose. The purpose of the slide to say is that when you start marketing your newsletter with social media, you have to have a fun mat that you dress up as and you go out in public and create content with. Going on an airplane, literally going through an airport with a bee costume on would be actually like a perfect example of that. Just kidding. That's not what the slide's about, but that is something that Bella Rose has done, which is great. Which is why we love her and why she is a genius. But yes, we have this bee costume. I will say that just as a sidebar, this is actually probably pretty good. This might be one of the nuggets that I should add as a slide. We had this conversation a couple weeks back. As far as marketing goes, this is more of a general like marketing thing, but it's like kind of quintessential social media marketing. When you are when you are marketing via social media, your number one goal is to really just gain a little bit of mind share within your audience's consciousness. And one of the discussions we had, Belrose, I'm going to put our one-to-one conversations on blast a little bit.
For
Nothing,
sure.
nothing too personal.
No,
But
you're good.
what we discussed was like, hey, like I do these bee costume things, and I also do like helpful, hey, here's this guide. And it seems that like the ones that are like, here's this guide do not necessarily as well as the ones with the bee costume. And we both recognize that people love the bee costume. People love the bee. My grandmother loves the bee. My grandmother was literally telling me, she's like, I love the bee. I don't know whether I should comment because I don't want to get you in trouble at work. I'm like, you can definitely comment. You're not going to get me in trouble. You can comment about the bee costume. It's hilarious.
We want the engagement.
Yeah, we want the engagement. And basically, I was telling Bill Rose, or we were just having the discussion that like, when it comes to social, the goal is to get that little bit of mind share. So if someone's more likely to stop and pause and just like, see the bee because they're like, why is this person on LinkedIn in a bee costume? And see the association, maybe they see the beehiiv logo, maybe they see the beehiiv name, even if they just watch it and they think it's funny and then they keep scrolling and don't take an action, what that has done is that's primed them in the future for them to then recognize our brand and our logo somewhere else. So that could be somebody else that they follow mentions that they moved to beehiiv. There's a great exercise I learned in the very first startup I worked at, which was a CPG company. We had a product that was sold in grocery stores. I was in charge of the digital part, but we were sold in grocery stores, did a lot of demoing. Do this exercise. Go to a grocery store and go to an aisle that you go to every time you go to the grocery store and look for a brand that you've never noticed before. And it'll take you about half a second to see that there's like probably 20 brands that you've never noticed before, because your brain shuts out so much of the stimuli that kind of bombards us at all times. And on social media, it's no different. When you're scrolling, your brain just has too much stimulation to recognize and process every little thing that's it's seeing. And what gets your attention is the things that stop the thumb. And then in the future, if you then see that same logo, if you see that same brand or that same channel, you are then more likely to then stop because you recognize that your brain has created that impression. And that is what awareness marketing is. And so fundamentally, at the end of the day, social media, in addition to community building, the step before community building is about awareness and generating that awareness in your users' consciousness. And you should, on top of providing value, on top of providing lead magnets and calls to action to your newsletter, you can do some stuff that is a little wacky and a little creative that grabs their attention. And in that way, I don't want to say like all attention is good attention, because I'm sure somebody will say a case where that's not the case, but it's like really as much as you can grab people's attention and stop the thumb, is it what it's called? Like thumb stopping content is going to be really good for you. So with that kind of impromptu sidebar, we're going to get to actually cross promotion. So this slide is about none of the stuff I've just talked about. It's about cross promoting the smart way. So once we've started building the brand, building community, and then converting our users through our social media content, the next step is to begin cross-promoting the smart way, which is taking content from one platform and moving it to another. I would do this very sparingly and carefully at first. So if you're on LinkedIn, you don't want to just, the whole punchline is you don't want to take exactly what you're posting on LinkedIn and just copy and paste it over to Twitter. If you're posting on LinkedIn and you want to move to Twitter eventually, basically start out by figuring out how that content can be repurposed and fit within that 240 character limit. And if it can't, forget it. You just leave it. But as it makes sense, take the content and slowly basically cross-pollinate between the two platforms, no pun intended. The other thing you can do is leverage partnerships. So if you are big on LinkedIn and you know somebody in your space who you're complementary with, who's on LinkedIn or on Twitter, leverage and borrow their audience and basically say, hey, let's do a partnership. I'll promote you on LinkedIn, you promote me on Twitter, and basically you can jumpstart each other's audiences. I do want to move a little bit quickly because most of these are just playbooks. So I will just quickly go over this. Once you've really started building these followings on social, you're really hitting the gas. It's at that point where I would start thinking about paid, where you can take the content that's already getting great engagement and great play and like building that brand. And what putting money behind it through paid ads does is just makes it reach new audiences. Organic, you're going to be limited by your reach by the algorithm. And so with paid ads, makes it way easier to reach new audiences, reach people that you wouldn't reach through an organic means, or that maybe it's a new audience that you want to test stuff with. And the process here generally is define your target audience. Who should you be targeting? Define your goals. What outcome do you want to drive? Typically, that's going to be a subscription through your site. And understand what is the economics, how much is a subscriber worth. We have a tool called Newsletter Navigator that I'm sure Tony will drop in the chat that will help you understand basically what the economics of your subscriber counts are. So you make sure that you're acquiring users at a price that is profitable. Part of that is setting up event tracking. We have plenty of guides through our documentation on how to properly set up tracking for ads so that when a user subscribes, you're passing that beta data back to the ad platforms in a way that's going to make it so that they can optimize those audiences. And then just like everything else we've talked about, testing is the key. Testing your creative, testing the copy. So the words that you're using, the images you're using, even the landing page and the content that's on the landing page are all great things to test. We have a bunch of webinars that are about these topics with a bunch of really great media buyers and agency folks. So Nathan May is one of the ones that we've talked to a bunch on these topics. We had one last week with Andy, I think that's getting posted today. So check out our webinar archive and you can see a bunch of different things here that, a bunch of different past webinars that we've done that will be really helpful. So moving to these last playbooks, I'm gonna go through these really quickly. These will be available to you in the downloads when we post these online. And we did a previous social media one. So if you want this today, you can just go to the past social media one in our archive on our blog. The first one's gonna be a lead magnet offer. So it's pretty straightforward. You're gonna create some sort of asset, some sort of lead magnet. You're gonna set up a tool like ManyChat that can auto respond to DMs and comments. And so then you're gonna post and say, hey, if you like, post and comment, we will send you the asset. It's a great way to drive social media engagement using lead magnets. It's something that Bella Rose does all the time. Second one is going to be collecting UGC. So this is going to be for testimonials and maybe social posts that talk about how great your platform is. These are great for ads and these are great just as organic social posts. So within your newsletter, set up a poll for user feedback. If somebody provides the feedback that they really loved your post, send them into an automation that then requests a quote, requests a video, etc., and then use that on social media. Lastly, there's a tool founded by, was this Michael Hauk? Yeah, a tool called Megaphone, founded by Michael Hauk, that allows you to basically reach out and connect with influencers who will take your content. You set up a budget, you basically set up the link to the piece of content, and there are influencers who are on the Megaphone platform who can then accept those different offers up to your budget to then spread and repost the content. So it's a way that you can do a little bit of hybrid influencer marketing, social media marketing, and technically it's paid because you're putting a little bit of budget behind it, but it's not running as an ad, a little way to dip your toe into influencer marketing. Lastly, I think this is last, do we have 4? Yeah. Lastly is creating a referral program within your beehiiv account, determining the appropriate numbers that make sense for you to do a referral shout out, and then basically saying, hey, if you reach the number of referrals, we're going to give you a shout out on social. This works particularly once you build a bit of an audience. Obviously, if you have 10 followers, it's not going to be super compelling, but if you have in the thousands of followers and you're building something that your community loves, this can be a really compelling referral offer that doesn't cost you anything. And in fact, just builds community to be a little bit tighter. So before we get to the questions, I'm sure there are a few, there always are. I do want to plug real quick. If this was useful to you, do I not have the slide? Yeah, I do. There we go. If this was useful to you, we do have an exclusive publisher Slack community that comes with your paid beehiiv subscription. I don't know how many of you out there today are on a free plan or considering to upgrade to the paid plan, but it's a free perk of the paid plan. There's no upsell. There's nothing you have to do in addition. When you upgrade to your paid plan, either Scale Enterprise or Scale Max or Enterprise, we will send you a link to the Slack community. There's over 3,500 members of the community and growing every single day. Hundreds of messages flying back and forth there's exactly 20 channels, things like monetization, design, deliverability, how to, product feedback, everything you can imagine, partner program, etc. So many different ways that you can basically connect. And these are all people who are actively building their newsletters. If you, for example, downgrade, unfortunately, you lose access to the community. Really knowledge dense part of the web. And if this was useful today, the hiiv, you're going to get a ton of value from. So with that being said, all right, this is actually a great question for BR. So Bella Rose, how do you think about using AI to post and manage the presence on social?
This is a good question. I am very wary of using AI in terms of copy and everything like that, because I just simply feel it does not sound as good. However, I do use AI to help generate ideas, or if I wrote something that's a little too long, I'm like, hey, how could you tighten this up? So I definitely try to do most of it manually, just because no tea, no shade to AI. I just feel like I could write something a little bit better, but I definitely use it to do some of those more like redundant tasks or like things that shouldn't take so long, like shortening things, like I said before, or like generating ideas or anything like that. In terms of posting, we definitely use, I don't know if this necessarily counts as AI, but it's like an automation, like where you can have people reply to something and then we will automatically DM you a resource or anything like that. We use Typefully for that on Beehiiv socials. I think you can use Hype Fury for that as well. Anything to add there, EJ?
No, I think that one of the things that we have a couple like custom GPTs that we've made for creating ad copy. But again, just like you said, it's really more a place that kind of gets you 80 to 90% of the way there rather than just done for you. But that can really get you into a really good place. I think that just creativity, there's something that AI hasn't quite been able to crack the code on, just replicating true human ingenuity and creativity in that way. Cool. The second question, I actually don't know if you'd have an answer to this, Belrose. I don't know if I have one off the top of my head, but what percentage of follower count could we reasonably expect to convert into subscribers? I know we've done a little bit of work on this with our talent stuff. I think that for our talent program, just for references, like when we talk about influencers with like hundreds of thousands of subscribers, we usually try to shoot for, I could be wrong on this, I think like 3%, but it's like for huge audiences. I think if you're building from scratch and really curating that audience, it could be much higher percentage wise. But do you have any thoughts around that?
Honestly, I'm not sure percentage wise,
Yeah.
numbers wise. I'd have to look into it, but we can definitely answer that question and get you the answer.
Yeah, I think it really also just depends on what you're building. Like I said, like with our talent program, a lot of these folks are not building, like they're just starting to build newsletters because they haven't done it before. So if you're an influencer who's gained 500,000 subscribers on YouTube because of your makeup videos, your primary media is like video and it's not newsletter. And so while a newsletter is very compelling in terms of expanding your reach and connecting with your audience, that's going to be a very different kind of like breakdown than somebody who's a journalist, for example, where like their bread and butter is the written media. And so in that case, I would expect there to be a good amount of variance between what you can expect. If you're just starting out, I would say experiment and see what's there. One of the things you could do potentially is like to look at newsletters that you admire and basically look at what kind of following counts they have relative to how many subscribers they have. Most newsletters will share rough numbers on how many subscribers they have. And you could try to compare that way. I would really look at an industry by industry approach in that way. We haven't done a retrospective of that. Perfect. So question was, can everybody on a paid plan use the Slack community, or is it just the admin on the account? And that is, it's everyone on the account, anybody within the workspace. The automated validation will not work. You'll have to reach out to our support team to have those other folks provisioned and added, but we would allow anybody on that team to be able to access. Alston had a question, is Beehiiv suitable for a funnel system? Oh, okay. I didn't respond, but Tony did for me. So funnel system would basically be like lead magnet, then offer. Not quite to the level of something like a ClickFunnels, like where you're going to be able to offer like a branching like upsell and tripwire and stuff like that. Our platform is very much more for kind of editorial type of newsletters or newsletter businesses where you're offering like the newsletter as the content. With that being said, with our new website builder that we're launching in March, that's in beta now, you will have much more flexibility than currently is available for creating those journeys. You would be able to do more. You could basically recreate something like a ClickFunnels experience with the new web builder. But that's just not publicly available to everybody. It's part of our beta program associated with the Max plan, right? Cool. Great. Thank you all so much for your time. I want to thank Bella Rose for spending her time with us today. Thank you so much for your expertise. It's a joy as always to have you share with the community. Thank you, Tony, Eyes in the Sky, taking his time answering all those questions, being so diligent in the chat. And thank you, all of you, for joining today. We had such an excellent turnout and so much engagement in the chat. Really appreciate your time and attention. And we look forward to serving you. You guys are the reason why we show up and do this. You guys make it all worthwhile and worth it. So our commitment to you is providing the best platform on the web to create and publish your content. We work tirelessly day in and day out to deliver on that promise, and we are beholden to you. So if there's anything that we are not doing to uphold those standards in your eyes, please reach out to us. We take feedback incredibly seriously, and that's really what dictates everything that we build and how we build it. So thank you so much. Have a great day. Bella Rose is laughing at me. You're not invited back anymore.
No,
Just
I'm
kidding.
laughing at the chat.
Oh, you're laughing at the chat. Okay. I'm petty like that, though. If I get confused, I might just not invite you back. But there you go. Give EJ Ken a Bella raise.
I'll host my own webinar.
Don't say that because I might hold you to that as well. I'm already doing 3 of these a week. I might make you do one of them. Just kidding. We have a good working relationship with everyone over here. Thank you, everyone. Have an excellent day.
Bye.
Talk soon, and we look forward to seeing what you build.
Thanks,
Bye.
y'all.